Walk outside, trees. How do they grow? They want light. They want air. They want water. And they want soil. Okay, we call it dirt. I've heard it many a time. I call it soil, and I'll explain why later. Plants that can be easily contained. You're not going to grow a huge great maple tree in a pot that size. It's not going to work. It's only going to grow as big as its roots in that pot will allow you. Okay? So that's the situation. So think about the plants that you're going to try and grow and think that they're going to fit into certain areas or certain spaces. And it's the roots, after all, that are going to give you that ability to grow upwards. Okay? Right. Plants that would prefer to be contained. There are some. And plants that we would prefer to contain ourselves. We'll come back to them in a moment. Tomatoes actually like being contained. They grow better in containers, often. Okay? There are things like ever-bearing strawberries. They like to be contained as well. Whoops, we're getting lost, but anyway, we'll get there in a moment. There's certain tender perennials, things that you bring inside every winter. Carol, bless her, gave me some celery last year, and it grew very nicely out on my wild heathland that I've got. And I knew that if I left it out, it was just going to get blasted by the frost and the snow and whatever. So I brought it in containers, just took it straight out of the ground, dumped it in a container about, well, one plant per half that size, and put them in the passage, and they're all doing fantastically. So there are things that you want to bring in over the winter, so you need to think about container space for them as well. Plants that we would like to contain. Mint. Don't ever plant mint outside a pot, because your entire garden will be mint, 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 as much mint as you ever could think of. And if you like mint tea, that's fine. If you don't like mint that much, put it in a pot, because otherwise it is going to take over. The same with horseradish. Horseradish is an absolute devil once it gets going. Lovely sauce, great to make, but don't let it get in your garden. Okay, there are other herbs also that would prefer to be potted. Okay, then plants that don't like each other. Don't try putting, in a big pot, don't try putting tomatoes and peppers and potatoes together. They all come from the same family, but they don't like each other. They won't grow nicely. Grow them separately. Plants that do well together, those are the companion plants, which we'll come back to later on. In fact, at the end of this handout that you've got, we've got a collection of little references to, and they're mostly websites. There are two references there. They're wonderful references on companion planting. Okay, so basically that. Then, most vegetables need 6 to 8 hours sunshine a day. There are a few that don't mind the shade to a certain degree. That's chard and spinach, lettuces, rhubarb doesn't mind a bit of shade, raspberries don't mind quite a bit of shade. But the rest really, especially the tropical plants, in other words, your peppers, your tomatoes, your potatoes, really do want 6 to 8 hours sunshine a day. So watch out when you're putting your plants out. Wind. Deeper and heavier pots, they won't fall over if it gets windy. So that's an important thing that's, it affects people who live in high-rise buildings, which doesn't really happen very much in Fredericton, let's face it. Okay. The soil, the suitable potting mediums. You're not going to grow cactuses in clay. Cactuses like sunny, sandy. That's where they came from. That's what they like. And then fertilizers, there are special fertilizers. Okay, so space. Look at the space that you have, the space that you need for what you're going to try and grow, and get it sorted out. Okay, on this one picture here, I haven't got a pencil. I'm going to have a thick finger. This little, no, it's not showing up. Can I get there or can't I? Let's see. No, it's too big. The bottom picture, there's actually an old palette there that somebody's trying to grow things out of. Now, I noticed that Pinterest, everybody's getting onto Pinterest at the moment, it's a really lovely site, but there's sometimes a trifle impractical. My future daughter-in-law showed me the other day, she said, look at this, wonderful idea, hanging mason jars off the curtain hooks on a curtain rail, and with plants in them. I'm thinking, whoops. A, she wanted to do it across a huge, big, open sliding door. Wind. B, watering at that height. C, mason jar. Clear. Roots. Roots don't like sunlight. Okay. Point taken? Point taken. The same, I think, to a certain degree with this idea of using pallets on their sides, straight up against a wall. A, the wall potentially could be extremely hot. You've got not very much space. Pallets are normally not that much wider than that, okay? So your roots are going to go hard up against the wall. They're going to get fried if that wall gets hot, okay? There's not very much soil. Your wall's going to get wet because you're going to have to water an awful lot, unless there's some sort of plastic barrier or a Tyvek type barrier here against the wall. So that's not the best idea if you don't want damp going through into the inside of your house. Okay, and also the spacing between the slats in most of the pallets that I've seen is not much more than that. So you can grow little plants, yes, but I'd rather see 2 pallets like that with a lot of soil inside, sort of in the triangle. All right, there's the triangle. Get the soil inside and then stick your plants in, out on a flat surface. That might work much better. I'm going to try that this year and see. I'll come and tell you next year what's happened. Okay, so that's aspect is whether you're north-facing, south-facing. Preferably south-facing, obviously, because you're going to get more sunlight. If it's north-facing, you're going to get a lot of shade during the day. Light and warmth, obviously, the more sunlight you're going to get, the warmer it's going to be. The soil's going to be warmer, and it's going to work better. Wind we've already looked at. Soil will come onto, and the type and depth. And obviously, what you want to eat. You know, don't go buying masses of seed for things that you don't think you're ever going to eat. I don't grow turnips, for instance. My husband does not eat turnips, so it's no good growing turnips except for if I'm going to sell them. You know, so it's what you want to eat. And obviously, the other factor is budget. So, light, sun, and shade we've had a look at. And the next, sorry, I'm going backwards, which doesn't help. Warmth, north and south facing, we've had a look at, quick glance at. Water, rain. If you've got a huge shade tree, don't plant underneath it. You're not going to get any rain. It's going to get blocked by that tree, especially a great big sort of canopy tree. Also, if you've got an open patio, just think about where the rain comes from. Are you in a rain shadow? In other words, the other side of the building is the side that gets the rain, or are you actually going to get rain when it rains in? And how deep is your patio? Because that's obviously going to be watering or not. Then we've got the wind, which we looked at. So is it sheltered or is it out in the open? I've got a really windy patch. My main sort of growing area is very windy, and this winter seems to have been very, very windy. Okay, soil is not just dirt. In fact, there's a book that is called Soil is Not Dirt. It's written by an American, and it's a very funny book. But here's the point. It's not just dirt. Dirt is what comes out of your garbage, your vacuum cleaner bag. That is dirt. Okay. Soil has millions of minuscule organisms in it. And those organisms are what help you grow your plants best. Clay, which is that really lovely stuff that you get really sticky hands from, which is what we have mostly around in the river valley here. plus silt, which is the stuff that floats down every year and the river deposits it when it floods. That's the little sort of top layer of very fine stuff. And sand are what make up what is called a loam soil. And loam is normally 10 to 30% clay, 30 to 50% silt, and 25 to 50% sand. That is the ideal composition for a really good growing medium. Then we need to look at pH, which is the acidity of the soil. Now, New Brunswick soils are generally extremely acid. That's why blueberries grow so well here, and why azaleas tend to grow well here, and rhododendrons grow well here. And most vegetables like it to be fairly acid. So if your middle point is 7 on the pH scale, if you're going acid, you're going downwards, you're going down to 3, which is your lemons. That's a really acid situation. And if you go upwards, you're going to alkaline. In other words, you're going from lemons to milk. And pH, the optimum most vegetables is somewhere between 5 and 7.5. So we're on this side, we're on the acid side for most vegetables. So if you're lucky, you can get a soil test, and there's you can buy little kits, and but we're fairly good in New Brunswick with normal soils. Nutrients. Best nutrients, compost. Best ever, compost and manure. Don't go to the fertilizers that you can buy, all these Miracle Grows and everything else. They are petrochemicals. You don't want them. You'll kill all those organisms in the soil. I'm an organic gardener. Please, don't bring me petrochemicals. I inherited a part organic farm and a part inorganic farm, because the people before me were actually organic growers, but they'd let part of the farm to a commercial farmer. It has taken 5 years to even see weeds growing on one spot, because the petrochemicals had leached that soil so badly that there was nothing. It was just a barren desert. So please, 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 don't use petrochemicals. NPK. Buy a bag of fertilizer. Here we go. Buy any form of fertilizer, even Gardener's Dream, which is what I use, which is a fish emulsion-based, and it smells horrible, but it works like a dream. You'll have N for nitrogen, P for phosphorus, and K, kalium, which is actually potassium. Now, it's like us. We take a whole lot of additives if we're feeling sick. You've got to keep your plants fed to the best so that they will grow best. And that's where you need to look at these 3. These are the 3 basic building blocks of growing. Nitrogen grows the plant leaves, and it gives you that lovely green, and the photosynthesis can happen, and your plants really grow well. Phosphorus is basically roots. It helps your root development. And I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to go into huge detail about it. And the potash helps with the budding and the seeding at the end. So those are the 3 things. But there are a lot of trace elements. If you are missing out on certain of the trace elements, and New Brunswick is particularly bad about boron. There's not enough boron in the soil here. That's why if you're growing beetroot and quite a lot of the root vegetables, you need to look and see whether your boron's sufficiently high, because otherwise they just sort of don't grow nicely at all. Depth of soil in raised beds, or actually in these containers. For tomatoes, peppers, and other larger plants, 12 to 18 inches deep, which is a pretty deep container. If you look inside this, there's a drainage system inside there which will stop you actually waterlogging the plants. They're very, very useful. In fact, never buy one of these without one of these. But that will give you the 12 to 18 inches in depth that you need to grow the bigger plants. So, this is not a small plant. Small plant, it's quite a sizable one. But that's the sort of depth that you need for larger plants. Then with the smaller plants, you can actually get away with lettuces and bush beans, radishes and things like that. You can get away with the smaller ones. Something like this. This is 6 to 8 inches deep. and it hasn't got that little inside insert. So you can probably get away with quite a few lettuces in there and some radishes and whatever, but you know, don't go smaller than that. This one's also quite nice. It's got holes in the bottom. Don't forget you need holes in the bottom for drainage. Okay? But it's also got a little sort of shelf in the middle, which makes the roots go down into either side of it, which is useful. That grows nicely. It tends to get them to grow nicely. And it's actually a railing planter, so you can put it on your deck railings, and you can use it for that. So this is, that's what you need. Deanie and I were talking about this the other day. She was all for having them all the way down the deck that we've got at work, leading out onto the street. So that's what those are. That's the usefulness there. And also it actually tends to lead the plant's roots down. So that's quite useful. Yeah. So, and then the medium, you would look at about a 10-inch. I haven't really got a 10-inch one here. But these are a lot of fun. Don't go using your bags from Tesco, from the superstore. They're not the same type of material. This is actually made out of what they call capillary matting, and they're called smart pots. And they are actually sort of, oh, that's the French version of it. And I'm not going to try that. There is an English version here. And they come in various different sizes. Okay, they're obviously a bag, but they are better than they contend that they're better than plastic containers, better than raised beds, because they release heat, they aerate the root zone, they stop root circling, and they air prune the plant's root structure. And they're great for aquatic plants, so they must be pretty good about keeping water in. So I've never used one of these. This is the first time I've ever seen one, so it's worth having a look at those possibly. Then, what else have we got here while we're on containers? This is a grow bag. Now, these are made out of material that's very similar to chicken food bags. So if anybody has access to chicken feed bags or anything like that, much cheaper than this, because this is $14.99 for one of these. Hi, Kate. Yes, this is a problem. It can be a problem. Yeah. We'll come back to that in a moment. Yeah. So this is on a patio or a balcony. We're talking more of sort of balcony growing here rather than actually growing onto the soil as such. Yeah. Because obviously plastic is made out of petrochemicals as well, so you have to be a little bit careful. But you can get more friendlier plastics than, you know, some of them are actually quite good. So that's that. So this is grow bag. Now there are not only this type of grow bag, but there's also the flat grow bag that they say that you can grow tomatoes in very nicely. They're about that long and they're about that deep. I find I've tried them. I tried them in England and I've tried them here. It's okay if you're there at home just about all day long, because the moment those bags dry out, your tomatoes is gone. Can't take this. And tomatoes tend to do that best of times. But these bags are not deep. It's much better to grow tomatoes in a bigger container and a deeper container, because then you don't have this problem of constant wilting. Constant wilting will set your plants back by a couple of weeks at a time. So beware of that. Then they've got a tomato barrel, which is this big thing here. And it actually, oh no, it's this one, sorry. And it has a little trellis that comes with it. And you can just go straight up from here into and the trellis sort of fits on the top of this. And this, again, has got, dig all the bits out of it. There's all, everybody like jigsaws? There we go. This one's got a pretty deep insert, which actually stores the water underneath, and the roots will go through the holes in this. Some of the roots will go through, and they will actually draw the water up. So these are quite useful. But again, they're plastic. Clay, I prefer clay generally, but that's probably because plastic wasn't around when I grew up. I always grew everything in clay pots, if he was growing in pots. So, sorry. Have a noisy business in a second. Okay, so rule of thumb, 3 square inches per small plant, 6 square inches per plant. This is root space, right? And 12 square inches per large plant. That's what you need. And we're talking the actual, we're talking about that size for a tomato plant. So it's big. Okay, so what do you want? Do you want vegetables and fruit? We'll get on to the top 10 easily grown vegetables in a moment. Fruit, ever-bearing strawberries, and you can actually grow, if you've got a big enough space and a big enough pot, you can grow things like raspberries, or black currants, red currants, josta berries, blueberries will grow in these pots, these big pots. But it's a bit fussy. So, and the other problem is that most, if you're growing on a patio, that's fine. But if you're trying to grow anything that is long-term in a community garden, they tend to ask you to clear out everything out of your bed by the end of the season. So then you've got to uplift it out of the bed and take it off and put it in a pot for the winter. So it's something to think about. Flowers and herbs, don't forget you need your pollinators. So if you're growing on a patio or on a deck, grow a couple of flowers. It'll bring you pollinators. They'll pollinate your seed for you, your vegetables, and everything will be much better. So grow yourself some edible flowers, nasturtiums, lavender. Lavender's great. Lavender's wonderful to eat, believe it or not. Lavender, ice cream, fabulous. We'll come to that later in the year. Anyway, companion planting for better growth and stopping the bugs, because there are certain plants that give off pheromones, smells, scents, that the bugs don't like. Little marigolds will stop certain bugs coming to your nice vegetables. So that's another thing we'll look at later on in time. And then looking at quantities, how many people are you planting for? The square foot gardening people say that you can grow enough vegetables in a 4x8 bed for one person for a whole year, if you're planting judiciously, let's put it that way. And then think about what you're going to do with your fall storage, your winter storage, and whether you're going to freeze. So 4x8 beds should feed a family of 4. Should be able to, if you're clever enough. Okay, top 10 vegetables grow in small spaces. Beans, bush beans and pole beans. Lettuce, obviously, and you can run lettuce right through the year. Radishes, they tend to be a cool season plant. Tomatoes. Carrots, if you've got the depth. Don't forget, if you're going to grow carrots in any form of container, that's probably one of your better ones, because they need that 12 inches to go downwards. Otherwise, unless you're actually growing one of the really short carrots, the little round, almost round carrots, the chantenay types, you'll need depth for them to grow. That applies to parsnips as well, rutabaga, any of those sort of root type vegetables. Broccoli grows easily. Cauliflowers tend to be tricky. Go for broccoli. Cabbages tend to split very easily, or they get eaten by the bugs. Mine always get eaten by bugs. But broccoli seems to be one of the easier ones. And rapini, I don't know whether you know it. Rapini is lovely stuff. Rapini is absolutely wonderful. It's easier to grow than broccoli. It's like a whole lot of little baby broccoli heads interspersed with leaves. It's fabulous for antioxidants. It's a really good green vegetable. It'll grow late into the fall. It's also known as rab or rabe rapini, rab. But it's the poor man's broccoli, let's put it that way. It doesn't make a great big broccoli head like the usual ones. It's a series of small heads. It's really nice. It's available down at the superstore right now, because I bought some the other day. Spinach and chard. Spinach, New Zealand spinach, is not the same as ordinary spinach, but it does grow very easily, and it grows right through the summer, and it doesn't bolt. Normal spinach will go up and it'll start flowering, and that's the end of it. But New Zealand spinach is a very tender little leaf. It's a sort of triangular leaf, almost like an ivy, and it grows almost like an ivy. It sort of grows sideways rather than upwards, and it's really nice. It's very easy to cook as well. It's very nice to steam it. Chard obviously will grow right into the fall very easily. Beets, I can't grow beets nicely. If anybody can teach me how to grow beets nicely in my soil, I'd love them forever. But I can't grow beets nicely, but a lot of people can. And there's some lovely colour beets these days. You know, they're not just the red beet. There are yellow ones, and there are ones, and there are purple ones. And they're actually, most of the older, the heritage varieties are actually the colour ones. So they developed the red beet that we're used to from the older, like the carrots, because carrots used to be multicolour. And they're going back now. People are growing white carrots, purple carrots, yellow carrots. I haven't seen any green carrots, except when they pop out of the ground. Okay, peppers and onions. So those are the top easy ones to grow. Don't try growing onions from seed, it takes too long. Get them from St. Mary's up here. You can buy them as sets, and they're pre-grown. They're started growing. They've then stopped them over the winter, and then they'll carry on for you from the spring onwards, and they will grow into the nice big onions for you easily. Herbs, thyme, rosemary, they're easy to grow. Mint, for goodness sake, put it in a pot. Please. Parsley loves being in pots. In fact, I've got 3 big pots of parsley sitting across my counter at home. My husband walks past them. He's like a caterpillar, he keeps eating them. I keep saying to him, hey, whoa, you're killing my plants off. Cilantro, obviously, that will grow easily in pots too. So will basil, so will sage. Savoury tends to like going in the ground, summer and winter savoury. Chives are very easy to grow, and they're perennial. So you might have to take them in over the winter if you've got a plot in the community garden. And obviously garlic. I put garlic under herbs, but I couldn't fit it on the other side. But garlic is very, very easy to grow, but you need to really plant it in the fall to get the best growth. Yeah. Okay, top flowers. These are all flowers that are good companions to vegetables. That's why I've put them in this list. So marigolds, that's the little ones that have got that very sharp smell, and they've got a spiky little, they've got a head that comes up like this, and then they've got a series of spiky little, looks like sticks as the seed.
Can I say something about marigolds?
Yeah.
Apparently nuggets are fancier ones.
Yeah, you can.
And they don't have the same quality.
No, it's
They're
the
not as aggressively fragrant.
yeah, it's the old single ones that you really need to get hold of. Yeah, because there are some beautiful doubles and multicolours and this, that, and the other, but it's the old singles that if you want to keep the bugs away, use the singles. Calendulas, that's what they call the pot marigold. Again, it's got a sort of slightly sticky leaf if you touch it, and it's got a flatter head. It's sort of that shaped head. Unfortunately, I didn't put any pictures up. Lavender, difficult to start from seed. Very difficult to start from seed because you have to have it hot, then cold, then hot, and then a spring. So you have to force it into thinking that it's winter, and that takes probably something like 16 weeks to get lavender going. And I went to a talk the other day, and this guy was talking about plants that you actually take 2 years to germinate. And I was thinking, I haven't got time for that. Anyway, borage, wonderful stuff. It's the silver bullet of growing amongst both strawberries and tomatoes to stop various bugs coming into those areas. It's a wonderful, wonderful, it's got a very pretty little blue flower that you pop into your drinks and you can eat the leaves. It tastes sort of almost like a cross between a lettuce and a cucumber, but it's quite hairy. So it grows about so tall. It's lovely stuff. Cosmos. Now, cosmos came from South America, and it's gone the world over. It landed up in South Africa during the Anglo-Boer War in the 1900s, the early 1900s. It came in as part of the hay that they were importing, the British Army were importing for their horses. It came from Argentina. It was dumped all over the countryside because obviously wherever they went, they took their horses and they took the hay with them. And it has taken over huge chunks of South Africa. So in about April, going up into the mountains where I used to live, you just see acres and acres of pink, white, and purple cosmos. It was just fabulous. and it's so easy to grow. And again, you know, they've now bred all sorts of pink and doubles and trebles and whatever, and dwarf ones as well. Pansies and violas, very, very easy to grow as well. Zinnias, likewise. Zinnias, lovely colours, anything from yellow through oranges to the deep reds. And again, they've done all sorts of things with doubles and whatever. But sweet alyssum, which is the little white bushy plant, it's got a very sweet, and that the honeybees absolutely love that stuff. They think it's the best ever. Nasturtiums, everybody knows, I think. They can go up or they can go sideways or they can grow fairly bushy. And sweet peas. Sweet peas are slightly difficult to grow. They're very greedy feeders. They need an awful lot of really good compost or manure. And when you start a sweet pea seed, what you need to do is get a nail file or a little bit of sandpaper and rub your sweet pea seed, because you have to what's called scarify the seed. Otherwise, it can't break through the plant inside. It's got such a tough shell to break through that it's really, really difficult for it. So you scarify it, then you soak it. Now, some people say that you soak them for 2 hours, some people say 6 hours, some people say overnight, some people say 24 hours. I find that if I leave them for 24 hours, they go soggy. So I tend not to leave them more than about 4 hours in warm water, lukewarm water, and then go out and plant them. But don't leave them for too long, because they really will get wet and go soggy on you. So fruit, ever-bearing strawberries, ordinary strawberries obviously, blueberries, try and get the low bush ones, not the high bush ones, because they go 8-10 foot tall. Gooseberries, if you like thorns. I've been trying to prune my gooseberries recently, and I have got thorns in every pore of my hands. Thornless blackberries, wonderful things. They're an American speciality. They do grow here so long as they've got a bit of shelter from really bad cold wind and cold areas. Raspberries, don't forget, if you're going to grow any of those sort of fruit, large containers. And most community gardens say no berries, unless of course you want to take a container, put it on your patch, and then take it away again in the winter. That's one way of getting around that. Okay, optimizing space. I'm running out of time. Succession planting. Plant for the cool spring, then the hot summer, and then the cool fall into the early winter. So you can actually get almost 3 lots of different plants in the same space, if you're clever. Interplanting, small alongside, under the shelter of larger plants. In other words, chuck a couple of radishes in, a couple of little lettuces, not these great big blousy lettuces, but the little ones, underneath your tomatoes. Don't try planting corn in these sort of pots. It doesn't work. It really doesn't work. Vertical, take everything up as far as you can, because then you're not going to waste the space going sideways. So put up one of these types of trellises. This is a very neat little trellis. It's actually more as a tomato cage, but you can use these as trellises as well. Just open them up completely and take your cucumbers up them. Take your vining tomatoes up them. Take your pole beans, except you need double the height for a pole bean, because pole beans go very, very tall. But you know, use height as well as space going sideways. And you can actually, with a bit of a stronger one than that, you could get yourselves into growing the smaller of the squashes and things like that. You know, the patty pans, the little yellow patty pans, they grow upwards very happily. And of course, these are the other types of. Oops. These are also tomato cages, very useful ones. These are the ones that I tend to use. Mine are a bit heavier gauge than that. That I think is a bit light. That would do for cherry tomatoes, okay? But this is the sort of size that you want for a good bush tomato. And the vining ones will go straight over the top of those and probably fall down the other side. So, but again, you can make these out of chicken wire much cheaper than buying them. But they are available at St. Mary's Country Store if you need them. And also, obviously, if you can get out there at the Scott's Nursery. Okay, extension of season, just very, very briefly. If you can get some really good thick fleece. It's called horticultural fleece. It's a white fabric, a woven fabric. If you're going to start plants early, you put the fabric over the top so that they don't get frosted by these little periodic little bits of frost that we get, or they don't get that much colder. You can put them on just a hoop which you make out of 9-gauge wire. You just literally cut the wire and just shape it. Or you can get proper cold frames which are made out of wood, and they've got a sort of like an old storm window, and they flap open, so when it gets really hot in there, the plants don't fry under the glass. You just open them up and then they're fine. So there are ways of doing it. Okay, so this is going to be your space. One table, one good sized dining room table is your space to grow your vegetables in. That's what the standard plot is in a community garden. Okay, 4 by 8 or 4 by 10 is what you normally will get. Why 4 feet wide? Because it's easy to get in from both sides and get at everything without stamping on your plants or stamping on the soil and pushing it down. Think about how you're going to place your plants in relation to each other, tall and short plants. We just talked about vertical growing, and when you get down to actually planting out, mark it out in the square feet. Just get some old twine or knitting yarn or something like that, and literally go and mark it out, because it makes it easier for you to. And that the underneath bit that there is from a book called Square Foot Gardening, and that's how he sort of tends to lay out his gardens. I'm sorry, it's not very clear. I couldn't find a better picture. Gardens, raised or not. Advantage of a raised bed. Grass doesn't grow in it. Grass can't get into it. Well, I say that quack grass can. But it warms up quicker. You can also stop other weeds coming in the sides. You can stop chickens going in the sides if you put fencing up. I've got chicken problems. But anyway, that's another story. And you can put covers over, like the one on the left-hand side here. That's that horticultural fleece I'm talking about. So what they've done is they've sort of put a big hoop over so they can cover those up so that it doesn't get frosted or too much wind or whatever. Disadvantage, they dry out quicker if you raise your beds. So that's something to think about. Okay, so that's pretty well it. Next session is...